my great pleasure to introduce Mark Brown, all the way from Houston, Texas. Welcome, Mark.
It's great to be here, Stephen.
It's 9 p.m. Texas time.
Yes.
I got
and Sunday. Yeah.
9 p.m. Sunday. I got that right. I was so nervous that I had miscalculated the time zones. 9 p.m. on Texas time, and Mark said it's been about 26 degrees there in Houston today.
Beautiful.
So coming into spring, that's early spring weather, is it? About to get a lot hotter over there. I'll introduce Mark and then I'll hand over to you. Mark Brown was born in Germany as an English citizen due to his father being stationed at an Air Force base. In the mid-2000s, he moved to New Zealand, where he held CEO roles in 2 charities, and he now lives in Texas, where he's the CEO of West Houston Assistance Ministries, or WHAM for short. WHAM offers assistance in meeting the essentials of daily living, including financial assistance, food, job search, low-cost, gently used items, and special programs such as back to school. WHAM helps more than 130,000 clients and donates more than 1.2 million kilograms of food every year. That is unbelievable. Mark is also, in his spare time, a deputy investigator or a detective with Harris County Sheriff's Office, where he works on cold cases and complex missing person cases. He's also an Episcopal Priest, having been ordained in the Anglican Diocese of Wellington, and I remember that when you were living in Wellington. Mark, it's fantastic to have you along. Thank you for taking the time on your Sunday to join us, and the virtual floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Stephen. It's great to have this opportunity to share in these curious conversations. And I want to just say it is a real pleasure to be here and also hear Stephen's Kiwi accent. And maybe later when I hear questions, I don't hear a lot of Kiwi accents here in America. And I lived in New Zealand for 6 years. Had some wonderful time there and was blessed to meet some incredible people. And periodically I go back, although COVID has made that a little bit difficult. I don't need to tell you that New Zealand took some stringent measures. And so there was quite some time where I wasn't able to come to New Zealand. And it's important for me to come to New Zealand because a couple of my adult children are in New Zealand. One of them's at the University of Victoria. I think I've got that right. And he's studying environmental science and ecology and stuff like that. So I do like to get back and see my kids when I can. Well, I want to talk to you about a couple of things. So first thing I want to talk about is really just in the time that I have is to give you some stories, to share some stories, and hopefully make it really interesting. That's my goal. Well, the first thing is to give some context. So I've been in Texas, Houston, Texas, which is famous for Houston. We have a problem. It is a very different world here. I've been here for 12 years. And in that time, I've become an American citizen and have really embraced the culture. And I want to give you some kind of comparison of how big Texas is, how big Houston is compared to Wellington, compared to New Zealand. And the chances are some of you have been to America. I know Steve has, but let me give you an idea of the size to start off with. The first thing is, as you well know, there's about 5.2 million people in New Zealand. In Houston alone, as a city, we have 2.2 million people. In the state of Texas, we have 29.5 million people. So 5.2 in all of New Zealand, 29 million in just the state alone of Texas. It's enormous, incredibly hard to describe if you haven't been here, but let me describe it one way that's familiar to all of us, and that's driving. You can drive in Texas, just the state, not the country, America, but you can drive in Texas for 10, 12, 13 hours and still be in the state. So from here to, say, El Paso, which is another town in Texas, another city in Texas, it's 1,351 kilometers, still in the state of Texas. Now, if Steve was to jump into his mighty car and drive to Wellington, as you all probably know, between here and where you are, in Auckland, I should say, drive to Auckland is about 630 kilometers, right? So 630 kilometers to get to the city up north. And for me to get to another city in Texas is 1,300 kilometers. So I just want to give you a sense of the vastness. And so when things happen, there's a famous expression that everything is bigger in Texas. And that is to some extent true. So we had a flooding in 2017, Hurricane Harvey. Everything is bigger. This flooding was with us for a long time, and tens of thousands of homes were wrecked. Hundreds of thousands of people were displaced. And I had been CEO of West Houston Assistance Ministries for just 3 months when that struck. So I took what is a social agency, as Steve put in the intro, to help people who are struggling, the poor, those in crisis, and I changed it overnight to a disaster relief agency. And that meant we were on the front line of trying to help struggling Houstonians with extreme stress and trauma. And so we managed to get through that. And then that took about 2 years to recover from. And then we had 1 year off. And then we all know what happened in 2020. So what you all did and experienced in New Zealand, as I shared before in Aotearoa, with the lockdowns and all these stringent measures, the closing of the borders, we did not have in Houston. There was a period of, I guess, 6 to 8 months where it was pretty stringent. Restaurants were shut down. But then after that, there's a whole lot of people not wearing masks. There's a whole lot of people that didn't get vaccinated. There was a whole lot of who cares attitude. And the reason for that is really important. I want to share it because this hopefully is interesting, is America is founded on the importance of personal choice. It is enshrined in the DNA here, the importance of personal choice. So when you go to a store here, or you go and just want to get a coffee, there's always so many choices. Because it's a big economy, but also because there's just so much importance placed in choice, and the individual rights are important to people. So what happens is when you have a major public health disaster like the pandemic was, it butted up against this choice. And there are two basic political views here. The first is Republican, second is Democrat. And the Republican are the conservatives, the Democrat are the progressives. Well, Texas is a Republican state. So what happened is that the amount of people who were killed here through COVID was astronomical. In fact, I lost one of my staff was killed, which was a really low moment. It was very difficult. So through that period with COVID, now we just had enormous need. We had so much need. And I'm going to share screen and just show you here just a little show and tell. Let me just share screen. I'll show you a couple of pictures. Here we go. Just let me know, Steve, if that's come up clear. Can you see that? Oh, you're muted.
Yes, yeah, go. All good.
Okay. Great. So what you're seeing here, what I'm showing you here is this is the food dispersal team for West Houston Assistance Ministries. And what they would do is their job was people would drive through, their cars, the back of their cars would be open. And then there was a lot of food here on the left. And then the team there with the yellow, and I'll talk about the military people in a second, would put food in the car, and as you can see. So the reason I want to show you this is that we went from helping pre-pandemic about 90 families a day to suddenly we were helping thousands of families a day. It was just a desperate, desperate need. And there's some of my team, and you can see there, it's one of my long-term serving staff, Sonia. And that's the staff. So the military, it got so overwhelming, the amount of need. That's me, and he's actually a senator now, Wes Hunt, the guy next to me. He's now, sorry, not a senator, a federal Congress member. He's a former Black Hawk pilot, a brilliant young man. He's now part of the federal politics, helping us out there. But we had the military there. They're called the National Guard because it was just such a disaster. So we had them with us for a very long time. And that was a very powerful experience to work alongside them. So let me stop share. So in the time that I've got, I want to transition now to something else about Houston that is alarming. So as I mentioned, I lived in New Zealand for 6 years. I've lived in Australia, grew up in England. I've had a lot of experiences, and coming here, one of the things that I wanted to do and was never able to do was to become a police officer. So I put myself through the police academy many years ago, and I became a sheriff's deputy, which is always unusual. It sounds like something out of the Westerns, right? Well, it's not too far off that. The sheriff of Harris County is elected, and then there are paid staff who are sheriff's deputies, and then there are a group who are reserves, which is me, who are not paid. So I'm going to put on my sheriff's hat here. This is a real sheriff's hat that I have to wear. I know. So this is the summer version, which as you can see, some sweat stains. So for a while, I worked out in patrol. And one of the things that you have to do in patrol is you obviously have to deal with some very serious incidents. You're trained with guns, you're trained with tasers, which is the electric shock. You're trained in combat. There's all this sort of stuff you have to do as a police officer in patrol. And I want to tell you just a quick story in the time that I've got of one of the probably most dramatic that happened to me. So I was doing a night shift. I was with my partner, and we'd been called to an apartment complex. And when we turned up, we were talking to the mother. She was having some issues with her daughter. It was about midnight. And she was engaging with the mother, and I was standing back. And one of the things that we do is we're always looking for danger. You're always what's called situationally aware. And I'm looking around, and I see a young man with a baseball bat. And I thought, that's curious. So I tap my partner, call them over, and I say, hey, just so you know, this is what's happening at 10 o'clock. You know, it's I've got eyes on it, we'll say. So I'm watching this guy, and then he sees me looking at him, and he disappears. And the next thing I hear is this almighty crash. And I quickly spin around, and I see a woman running towards me in distress. And of course, I'm like, what's going on? And she said, this young man just threw a bottle at me, it missed me, smashed on the wall. So we disengage that call, we get on a radio, and we tell the dispatch what we're doing. And we go over to find a young man yelling and screaming. And he is very, very upset. And so we're trained in de-escalation, which is taking someone who's very angry, very upset, and calming them down. So as Steve mentioned, I'm also an Episcopal Priest. It's an unusual combination, I know. So I'm used to kind of interacting with people and helping them through their crisis. It's one of the things I'm trained as a pastor. So I start to engage him and calm him down, and he just is not calming down. He's screaming. And then he goes up to what turned out to be his vehicle, his car, and he smashed out the passenger side window. Very angry. And now he's got blood all over him. And now at this point, my partner takes her taser out, which is a yellow electrical charge. It's not a gun. It's meant to stop someone. So she takes the taser out, and I'm like, don't tase. Let's see if we can calm him down. He starts to walk off, and he starts to walk between the apartment buildings. It's like 12:30 at night. It's pitch black. He's just screaming and, really ranting. And we're keeping our distance, and we're like, hey, sir, just stop. He starts hitting other cars. So, all right, sir, just stop. We just want to have a chat. And he keeps walking. Well, as we're approaching the exit to the apartment complex, I look over and I see a main road. And I see cars racing down the road. And I looked at him, and he was walking very quickly towards the road. And I'll tell you this way, I've never had this happen before, but it was like a movie was playing through my mind. I knew exactly what was going to happen. Exactly. So we wear body cameras. And my partner's body camera actually caught this moment of what actually is about to happen. And all I did is I started sprinting towards him. At that point, I was probably 20 feet back, trying to maintain a safe distance in case he did something, but obviously monitoring him. And I sprinted. And as I ran towards him, he stepped onto the road in front of an oncoming car. His intention was to kill himself. So I remember looking at the car, looking at him, and I was so calm. It was really a surreal moment. I wasn't panicked or anything. It was just very calm because I knew what was going to happen. I knew he was going to do that, and I knew how he was going to do it. And so I stepped into the road, and I had a decision to make. If I grab him in the wrong way, what will he do? He could pull me, and I could be the victim of a car crash. So I had to grab him in a way that was safe for me and safe for him. So I grabbed him, and what I did is I leant backwards, and as the car approached, I pulled him towards me and held him. And the car actually brushed us as it went by, but didn't hit us. And then I guided him to the curb and sat him down. He's covered in blood. He stops and looks at me, and his eyes are wide, and then he starts crying. So I went from this very dramatic experience to now comforting him. We sat him down. Now, I put him in handcuffs because that's the thing you have to do, but I'm comforting him. I'm just calming him down. So we then help him to his feet, and I'm walking him back to the parking lot, the car park, and suddenly, and we're on the radio and we're getting a mental health unit, people who are qualified in that area to come and be with him. Suddenly, these citizens, these people who are not police officers, surround us, and they've got their cameras out. They're like this in my face. And they start haranguing me. And they're saying, you police are corrupt, and you're doing this, and you just beat up people. And, you know, there's a lot of controversy here in the States around this. And I couldn't say anything. I couldn't say to them, you know what? This man is alive because of what the police just did, what I did. He's with us, but I couldn't say anything. I had to absorb the verbal blows. And we sat him down, and we were able to get him the help that he needs. So since then, I still do patrol, but I don't do it a lot because, and I'll tell you why. The crime rate in Houston compared to Wellington is more than double. So there is such a gun culture here in the States that, without exaggerating, I have had my gun out. I usually have my gun out once a shift. And what I mean by that is when I put on my police uniform, my gun is out at some point. On Tuesday just past, I was called to a shoe store, and the call came, it dropped as the staff have called 911, which is the police emergency line, because there's a guy with a rifle in his backpack. So, all right. So I enter the store, and I'm like, where's the guy with the rifle? Now, here's the thing, the crazy thing about Houston. It's legal for him to have a rifle in his backpack. Completely legal. So I knew that. So I'm not going there to say, hey, you can't have a big old gun. But I was worried that he was going to be an active shooter, or there was going to be something that he was going to do. So I approach him. Turns out it wasn't a rifle. It was to cut the hedges, but it was sticking out, and it concerned the staff. It ended up being that he was trying to steal shoes. We dealt with that. But the point of me sharing that is that it's actually a very violent city to be in. And so one of the things that I've done as I come to the end of my time and open up to Q&A is that as soon as I could, I became a detective. So even though I do a little bit of patrol, I'm not doing a lot because of how dangerous it is. So I want to finish with a story from my detective work. And I have to kind of protect the identity, but I think I can tell you enough to give you a sense of what happened. So a mother came to me because her daughter had been kidnapped by her ex-husband, and the daughter was very young and had health issues, so that kind of ratcheted up. It wasn't already, and so I said, well, as a detective, my job was to try and locate that daughter and prosecute that, arrest the ex-husband, because the court had determined when he could have the daughter, and he didn't care about that. He just took her. Well, we found out that he'd left the country, and he'd gone not to New Zealand, but he'd gone somewhere pretty dangerous, without naming names, but it's a very dangerous country. And then we got really worried, or I got really worried. And so I started to involve the FBI, the State Department, and other American agencies who operate overseas. And if I could get an arrest warrant for him, we may be able to get this daughter back. So I went to a judge, I told the story, and the judge signed an arrest warrant for the man. Even though he wasn't there and I couldn't arrest him immediately, I had a warrant, and that meant I could take this off now. That meant that the FBI and all the other agencies could get involved. So we ended up, one day I got a call from a country which I can't say, but it's in the news, and this is like a movie, but this really happened, from one of the people in that country. And it was on my cell phone, and they said, we know where they are on the planet. We know what flight they're on. We know when they're landing. Do you want us to grab them? And I had this moment of kind of pause where I was like, how did I get into, like, what is happening here? Like, I don't know if you've heard of the phenomenon imposter syndrome. It's where you feel like, I don't know if I should be here. I felt that in bucket loads. So suddenly I'm having this kind of crazy movie moment where I'm like, okay, that sounds like a plan. I mean, I don't know what to say. I certainly hadn't been trained in that. So I said, yeah, that sounds like a plan. Try not my voice to crack. So he lands. This team descend on the baddie and discover the girl is safe. And then we have to get them back to Houston. And I'll finish up with this last piece and then open to questions. And so now you have to work out, how can we get them back to Houston? They're called assets. The agency people were going to travel with him and them. But we had to go through countries that if something happened, we could still extradite them, right? It was really kind of crazy experience. So eventually we get them back to Texas, and then they're landing in a part of the airport that is not to the public, that is just for law enforcement. And again, I'm kind of keeping it general here, because once they get on Texas soil, guess what he can be served with? The arrest warrant. Gotcha. So I'm going to show you, actually, I won't show you. I'll tell the story. So the mother, I've been in contact with this whole time, saying, I think we've found your daughter. I think we've found, like, this is happening. The mother travels to the airport, and I said to her, all I want from you, I don't need a thank you. I don't need any of that. Just send me a photo of you and your daughter. That's what I want. That's my pay, my gift. And sure enough, she sent me a photo. And with the photo, it said, it's my birthday today. So I didn't know this. So for her birthday, we were able to reunite her with her special needs daughter in the most crazy story that one day probably would make a fascinating teledrama, if not a movie. And I have that photo, and we'll keep that photo forever. But just the reason I want to finish with that is I want to say that we had an email thread with all the different agencies, all these people overseas, these real professionals, not me. And I said to them, my sign-off statement to all of them was, this is when America works. So I'll say it again. This is when America works. And what I mean by that is that I know the reputation America has overseas. I've been overseas. I know how it comes across, and I know how law enforcement are seen as well. I'm not silly. But there are moments, and it's not often talked about, where they do incredible things, like reuniting a hurting mother with a special needs child in the most extraordinary circumstances. And I just wanted to finish with that positive story, but I welcome your questions or clarifications, and no question is off bounds. The only thing I won't talk about is whether the Wallabies or the All Blacks are the better rugby team, because I think we all know it's the All Blacks. So, thank you, Steve.
That's right. Thank you, Mark. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you for sharing those stories. It sounds like there are times when it's an incredibly rewarding job. I've got some questions. We've got none in the chat just yet, but I'll if you've got a question, anybody, just chuck it in the chat. Down the bottom, there's a little speech bubble that says chat, and you can type your question in there, and it'll pop up for us to see. In the meantime, I have some questions that I'll ask. That's all right. That last story you shared, and the first one you shared, really moving stories with positive outcomes. You must have some days where, the outcomes aren't positive. How do you kind of decompress, or how do you process that?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and police are exposed to a lot of violence. There's a famous quote that says that law enforcement go into the shadows and the darkness so everybody else doesn't have to. So one that came to mind, and this is really heartbreaking, was I was called to an apartment. Even telling this is so horrific, where in front of the 10-year-old boy, the mother and the grandmother were living in this apartment. There was a lot of people in the apartment. They were quite poor. And the mother and the grandmother in front of the 10-year-old boy said, "I don't want him anymore. I want you to take the 10-year-old away." And just like, how do you react to that? You can't lecture them and say, "How dare you? He's standing right here. What are you doing to his psyche?" But that's what they did. And so the quick of it is, we can't take the child away. It doesn't work like that. That's not what cops do here. And try to counsel her and say, why? What's going on? So the way I decompress from, it's not just the violence, it's the sadness and just seeing pain. And I could get into some gruesome stories, but I will not. I don't think it's appropriate, but it's just, you see some really horrific things. And the way I handle it is exercise. I do a lot of bike riding, and I try and eat well. And I just have a really supportive wife. So yeah, and also I will say that cop friends of mine, we talk a lot. Often after every shift, we kind of process it with each other.
Mm. You talked about getting your gun out on each shift.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, at that moment must be a lot of fear. How do you are you taught to handle that kind of fear at that moment? That is it terrifying? And how do you said you remain calm at one point? How do you do that?
Well, there's a great quote that says, "You don't rise to your expectations, you fall to your level of training." So what that means is, if you kind of like have this expectation that when it really hits the fan, you're going to be stepping up and getting it done, that's not true. And that's from someone who's been, again, I don't want to get too graphic, but one of my police partners was shot 7 times. I was there. I was part of that scene and saw him covered in blood and all that came with that. My mental expectation that I should be able to handle that is just, it's fantasy. What works is training. And so we do a lot of tactical training. And that means that when you engage in a really difficult situation, whether it's someone having a mental health crisis, like I shared the story, or you have to bring your gun out to face someone who's violent, I've done lots of training in that already. So it's just automatic. And then the other thing, and I'll share this is real kind of behind the scenes, is we talk tactical breathing, which is like on Saturday, I was part of a search for a fugitive who tried to kill 2 police. And we were out in the swamps. In fact, I was trying to bring up a photo of it, but there was a moment where, here we go. I don't know if this is going to show up on this. Let me try and share it with you. I'll just share it with you in a second. But there was a moment where I thought I'd come across a hidey hole where they were. And I had this moment where I told everybody, because I was with some folks who weren't police. Like, I was the only cop. So I'm going to show you a photo, share a screen here, and I'll show you this, see if I can bring this up, and then I'll quickly answer Steve's question. So tell me if you can see that, Steve.
Yes, good.
So that's me in a swamp on Saturday, just gone. And behind me is what's called a deer blind, and they use that for hunting deer. It wasn't that one particular, but there was another one where we were traipsing through the thick bush. If you look down on my left leg near that, below the yellow taser, that's a machete that I use for cutting through the bush. So we were really in the thick of it, and I came across a deer blind, and I had to take my gun out, and I told everybody to hang back, like take cover, because I needed to tactically approach it and clear make sure that the fugitive wasn't there. And what I did is, as soon as I started, my heart rate went up, understandably. So I had my gun out, and I'm feeling the grip, and I'm, getting relaxed, and I start tactical breathing, and it slows your heart rate. And then I got on with it. They weren't in there. I cleared it. It turned out that we weren't able to find the fugitive. They were well-hidden survivalists, but we will get them. We're still searching.
You are working as a detective on cold cases. Do you spend most of your time as working for the police, working on cold cases?
Yeah, so I don't do a lot of cold cases. I'll tell you why, and this is kind of interesting, I hope. I don't know if any of you are really into cold cases. There's a lot of Netflix and podcasts. And so you probably know this better than I, perhaps, that technology has really shifted with cold cases. So it used to be you'd read, like, these are where people have been killed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And cold case detective work would be re-interviewing, looking at all the evidence, and just trying a fresh take at it. What's happening now is, I don't know if you've heard of the Golden State Killer. The Golden State Killer was captured. He was a serial killer, but he was captured through DNA. And so the real move right now is using DNA. And all that happens in that is that you get some DNA from the victim, and then you see if there's any DNA from the suspect. And the technology is so advanced now, and again, you probably know this, is you can even just have what's called touch DNA. So I do a lot of DNA collection, which is swabbing people's noses, mouths, usually their mouth, and then we send it off to a lab. And then if we expedite the process, it takes 6 months. It's very slow. And then it comes back, and then we have a database. And so we run the DNA codex database. And if we have a match, and this is a really cutting edge stuff, genealogy, then that's how they got the Golden State Killer, is that they were able to look at, which family did the DNA, and then they were able to kind of narrow it down till eventually capturing him. So it's changed cold cases. Now it's much more about DNA, which takes time.
Okay. Rosemary has asked, seeing there are so many guns out there, do you wear a full body armor and a helmet while on the beat?
Yeah. I'll actually grab the helmet, the armor. You just quickly grab it here. So this is what I've got here. So I have a vest that I wear, and you could see it in that photo. And then this is part of the armor. So I slipped it in the vest. I've got one for the back and one for the front. And that's not really, that won't stop a powerful bullet, which is why I also have this. So this goes in a special pocket, and this will stop a type of gun called a 9mm. But if they've got a really powerful rifle, I just better pray that I can do matrix and dodge it. But we do wear armor. And I will tell you, when you've got this on and you've got all your police gear on and your hat and all of that, and it's 40 degrees, not pleasant, but you're kind of safe. So yeah, I do wear armor. Thank you, Rosemary. Great question.
Thanks for that, Rosemary. Any other questions, just pop them in the chat. We've got a few more minutes with Mark. Can I ask you a couple of questions about WAM?
Sure.
The pandemic obviously changed a lot of things for you guys. Have you what's happened since, with 3 years on? Have you seen some sort of permanent issues bed into place that have been a result of the pandemic?
Well, then America went into a nearly recession. I say recession, it's nearly a recession. Inflation went up. So the economy started to struggle. So that's really the answer. America's a very divided country. You may feel New Zealand is divided, and obviously every country has a certain amount of division, but it's tribalistic here. It's vehement. January 6th, we had the insurrection, which is where, hopefully you saw this on the news, it was hard to witness, where Americans attacked, the Capitol, like smashed windows and just did crazy stuff. And my local congressman, her and I sat down after that, and I said, "What?" She was there. She was part of that. And I said, "What was it like?" And she said, we thought we were going to die. Like, it was that bad. It's a very divided country. And that's operating in that environment is very tough. So you've got to learn to be neutral. If you want to help people, I don't care who you believe, what your view is. If you're poor or struggling, I will help you. And your politics is not important. So.
The question from Margaret about your opinion on right to bear arms in USA and almost the daily reports of mass shootings. That's a big question. Do you want to get into that?
Yeah, of course. So did you all hear about the Uvalde shooting, the primary school?
Yes, we did, yeah.
That's down the road from me. So I'm trained in what to do with an active shooter situation. Like, that's just horrible that I'm trained in that. I know exactly how to act, and how you act as a cop is you don't wait. You enter the building and you engage to neutralize the threat, and you go past people who have been shot and are screaming, and you go and neutralize the threat. So there's a high probability that one day I may be in a situation like I've been in shooting situations, but not active shooting. That's a unique beast. We just had another active shooter here last week. A rookie cop and his training officer approached the building because again, that's what you're taught. You just got to engage them and neutralize the threat. And the rookie cop was shot in the head. And the training officer found cover. And the rookie cop is in hospital, but obviously has not died, but is severely wounded. And they did kill the shooter, the active shooter. The training cop actually stop that threat. But I will tell you that this is probably the most confronting part of living here. I remember when I first came and someone took me to a gun store. And remember, I came from New Zealand. I mean, guns it's not part of New Zealand culture, right? And went into this gun store you can get guns at a supermarket. Like Countdown, right? I mean, it's crazy, and everybody has guns, and it's like a matter of pride. Like knives, everybody carries knives, and you can carry guns in Texas in the open. In other words, you can have a gun in a holster and walk around the street, and it's not illegal. It's called open carry. It's legal. So it's very, very confronting. I couldn't believe how easy it was to get a gun. And it's just a big culture here. I would say that it's a very difficult thing to live with, because there's something called the My Castle rule, and I'll finish with this here. The My Castle rule is a law here in Texas that if someone breaks into your home, castle being your home, and threatens you, like you feel that your life is threatened, then maybe they have a gun or a knife. As a citizen, you can take a gun and shoot them dead, and you won't be prosecuted. It's called the My Castle rule. So this comes from, people often ask me, how is it like this in America? Well, how was America founded? This is not the First Nation. I'm talking about the Pilgrims when they came. Well, they fought the English for independence. They fought the native folks for the land. It was birthed out of conflict and out of war. And that DNA, that style, the cultural markers continue today. It is very normal to have a gun here. It is unusual to meet someone who doesn't have a gun. It's so different to New Zealand, and it makes it a very dangerous place to live. I'm going to be very frank.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Look, one more question I've got for you is with regards to WAM. Do you see a lot of older people there? What are some of the issues that older people in Houston might face?
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge Margaret's follow-up. Yeah, the Walmart, that's exactly right. She said she was in Texas and she went to buy insect repellent, and there was a wall of guns. Guns are not good for insects. So the mosquitoes are pretty big. You don't need a gun. So insect repellent, good call. But yeah, it is crazy here in that respect. You know, man, this is a tough one. And I don't know how it is in New Zealand, Steve. You could certainly give me insight. But what we're finding here is there are government supports for seniors here in Texas, but they're not enough. And I don't know if that's the case here, a case for you all as well. So we see a lot of folks who should be enjoying their lives in retirement who don't have enough, and they're living very impoverished. And the government doesn't provide, so there needs to be a safety net. There needs to be other things. The church is very generous here because, as you probably know, the church is a big part of the landscape here. People like WAM, where I work, we do provide lots of food, lots of financial. But I will say we've seen an increase in seniors. In fact, so much so, Steve, that we have special day every week where we just serve our senior population. Because they're also, we changed the way we got them food, is that a lot of them weren't able, they were housebound, shut-ins. I don't know what the wording you use there. And so we actually got a partnership with DoorDash. I think DoorDash is there. And they will deliver food to these seniors who can't get out and about. And so that's been a really cool partnership. And that's something you might want to look at in Aotearoa. They've been very generous with that. So,
yes, I think we're certainly facing a lot of the same issues here. Health system, government support. There's just not enough to go around, and we are seeing it, but certainly not on the same scale that you're seeing in Houston. But Mark, I want to just acknowledge you and say thank you. It's been fantastic to have you with us this evening. Your time. I really appreciate it. And I just wish you all the best in both roles that you have. You have three roles, actually. Your priest role with the church, your role with Harris County Sheriff's Department, and also your incredibly important work with West Houston Assistance Ministries. So well done. It's fantastic. And thank you again so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Kia ora. Bless you. I appreciate the chance to share today, and thank you for the opportunity.